This is Sportish.
Do it better.
This is Sportish. This is Sportish. This is Sportish. This is Sportish.
This is Sportish. Happy New Year's Eve, everybody. Thanks for joining us on For the Fans. Geoff Brault, Dr. Keith Strudler, the director of the School of Communication and Media at Montclair State University. What a long, strange trip it's been. We have made it to the end of 2020. I can't believe that we're here, both us, the Sportish family, and we, the collective of everyone on the planet.
Yeah, well, I will also say this. So everyone right now is like, oh, can't wait to put an end to 2020. Like this, the worst year. First of all, there are some people who lived, through the 40s might suggest not the worst year ever, but memory is fleeting. So
also true of people that lived through the 30s. And there was another pandemic in the 20s.
I've heard the Black Plague was unpleasant. And
also in the 10s, there was a big reason why the 40s weren't great. That was also true of the 10s.
So we're like worst year ever. And then you have recency effect, sure. It's a very bad year. But they're saying that like, let's put 2020 to bed. I got a news flash for you. 2021's not looking sharp. Like, so if you think turning this clock over, it's going to be like new leaf, new year, new me. Like it's going to be a rough beginning. So I don't want to get too excited about putting 2020 to bed. Beyond that, as I said in our last episode, which for those of you that have not seen it, you need to go back and watch it. Some of our finest work. The White Elephant, of course, changed a lot of lives. But 2020 for Sportish was a strong year. It was a strong year. We will remember this year as the beginning. Some might say the beginning of the end, but we will remember this as the beginning of an era of the Sportish era.
I mean, unequivocally the best year we've ever had on Sportish. I say that with the utmost confidence. And by the way, do watch old episodes, The White Elephant, any of the episodes that you'd like to watch, ftfnext.com. You'll see Sportish down there. And click on
You can also get the app up on your TV and you can watch it like, on a big screen. You can do it however you want it, of course. Yeah. But I think what you should do, and we're going to talk, of course, to station management about making this happen just on its own. Sportish Marathon is a great way. Let's say it's the first, this weekend, you're just like, maybe you had a little bit too much to eat, too much to drink, which by the way, that is 2020. I mean, the waistlines, I got to believe that when we all come back out, we're not going to like what we see. We're not going to like what we see. So, but you should just turn on Sportish. Start, I think we started on the air in episode 12. I believe that was because we had already done about 11 episodes. And plus, of course, our the inaugural, the episode 0, of course, the intro, as well as, of course, something that I still hold near and dear, Too Hotter to Handle.
Yeah. Gosh, remember that? What a different time.
That's how long this year has been. Remember, not that long. I mean, 2020 is so long that you have forgotten that maybe the seminal greatest piece of television ever came out earlier this year. It feels like 10 years ago, but Too Hot to Handle came out in 2020. I'm surprised we haven't seen a Too Hotter to Handle.
Well, because they can't film it. They can't get people together to film it. There might be another one.
Well, they test them.
With the pandemic, you can't bring them together to film things right now. It's a big issue in the world of content. Those are all podcasts, so you can get them on your Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, whatever. Sure. Just search for Sportish. We're there. Okay,
5-star reviews. 5-star reviews. We want the 5-star reviews.
You brought up the White Elephant gift exchange last month. Mr. Peanut, he's still hanging out. He's still back there.
Jason Freeman is really He is really like. He's genuinely disappointed about how you behave. Your behavior was reprehensible.
And yet, the peanut's still on the shelf. I felt, Christmas was last week. My mom, I'd like to show, my mom got me, here, I have it. This is a tin of popcorn. Now, I am one person I am one person. This is a 5-pound tin of popcorn.
Is it divided? Do you have the
yeah,
three?
it's the 4. So it's got the caramel corn, the yellow, the white, the cheddar. Like it's got the 4 varieties.
What's your favorite?
Why 5 pounds?
Well,
what am I supposed to do with that?
Tell Mrs. Brault to send it to the Strudler household. I guarantee you, if that made it into this house, I give it one evening, and the can might be eaten as well.
But you got 4 people. I am one person. My mom knows this.
I'll tell you what, if that got shipped to the Strudler household and you came by 4 hours later, it would just be a fire come like a dumpster fire.
Like the hobos are warming their hands around the.
By the way, what's your favorite? I think we're going to be the same on this one. I think it's going to surprise you. What's your favorite of the 4?
Of the 4 popcorns? The caramel corn.
Oh, I'm surprised. I think the cheddar. The cheddar is the gold.
No, we'd get along well because that's my least favorite. In fact, I'm only eating
Really?
2 of the 4. I only eat the yellow and the caramel corn. I like to mix them together.
Sure, that's like all right. You like to tone it down a little bit, right? You tone it down a little
Yeah. I mean, the cheese ones, when you get like the not fresh, it doesn't come like at the state
cheese.
fair or whatever.
I
When you get
love
the
the
not
cheese.
fresh ones, I don't care for those too much.
The white
so
cheese.
it's a 5
By the way,
pound
yeah.
tin, but only 2.5 pounds I'm going to eat.
I'm one of those people that even though I know the white cheddar corn tastes exactly like the yellow cheddar corn, I see white cheddar and it feels like it tastes like I eat with my eyes. I think I eat with my eyes. I don't think I taste anything. I think I've had COVID my whole life.
Yeah, I mean, there's something about like an orange food, right? That just doesn't feel natural. Like outside of, the orange, there aren't a lot of orange foods. Whereas white, I think, feels a little more natural, a little more clean, a little more fresh, even though they are both processed and each will kill you.
Salmon is orange. So, well, I guess technically it's actually
I
salmon.
believe salmon would be salmon. Yeah.
Orange is a tough color to make work like in an outfit too. That's why, as you can see, I'm all gaitered up today. I'm still sticking by the team. That's the one thing I want to put. I want to put 2020. I want to put the LSU game behind us. Like this is. I want to put that. I want to leave. That's something I want to leave behind. No, we're going to be talking about the year in review.
Yeah, we are.
The Sportish year in the review, the sports year in review. I want to leave that game in the back rearview mirror.
But I do want to talk about college football first, because you, Keith Strudler, got awfully spicy in the tweets last week. You got awfully spicy. I want to take you back to 10:02 p.m. on December 26th.
What was I doing at 10:02 that I like? That if anyone who follows me on Twitter, and by the way, please do and follow the show as well. There is like days and weeks of inactivity, and then 12 tweets about something that no one cares about.
So you were watching
in America.
You were watching the Coastal Carolina Liberty game.
Yep.
And I was also watching it. And you decided 10:02 p.m. December 26th to tweet out, reminder, you don't go for 2 down 5 until the 4th quarter. This is Coastal trying to come back. They score a touchdown. They're down 5. They go for 2.
Yeah.
This tweet received the exact number of likes it should have, 0.
Explain
yourself. Yeah. Why do you not go for 2 down 5 with 5 minutes to go in the third quarter?
All right, Nate Silver. Here's why. Because exactly what might have happened. And Coastal Carolina found themselves in a very uncomfortable situation not that much longer. So the reason you go for 2 at that period, right, as many would suggest, if you're playing kind of stats ball, right, the odds are, I guess, I think I don't know what the odds are of, generally speaking, of you making a 2-point conversion. Obviously, it's situational, it's team by team, it's weather related, it's all of that, right?
Of course.
But I'm saying if you take an aggregate, you can take your team's aggregate and be like, we make it this percentage of the time, right? You can kind of do that.
Yeah, Coastal Carolina, by the way, was 1 out of 5 on 2-point conversions prior to their bowl game.
So not looking good.
Not great.
Not looking good as a team.
I actually think that's kind of average, right? Isn't like 25% about the average conversion rate?
No, I think they do better than that. I think that's the whole point. I think the point is, I thought it was actually approaching or over 50%, which is why some coaches say you should go for it every time.
If you're over 50%, I mean, it's not hard. You double the amount of points you get. If you can double the amount of points you get and you're better than a 50% chance to do that, statistically, you should do it every time. So I don't think it's that hard.
But you have to. So the thing is, this is like, who's our coach we had on early in the podcast? Who's our coach?
Oh, Kevin Kelly, the coach who never punts.
Right. So he buys into stats all day long, but he's basically like, look, the only way to do this is to do it all in, and you play the long game. And this, I'll get back to the initial question. You're playing the long game, which is I may make a bad decision because I'm always doing this, right? There may be times when I probably cost my team the game because I must stick to the system. His theory is over the long term, you're going to do better than if you don't. And once you start going situational, you're going to lose that kind of aggregated advantage. So here's what Coastal Carolina wanted to do. Right. By the way, I have no skin in the game. I happen to like the shot to clears. Not a huge fan of Hugh Freeze. I suppose technically speaking, I'd go with Coastal Carolina. I got no real horse in the race. By the way, Liberty has like 100,000 students. So when they do this is Liberty, they're like, join our 180,000 students. By the way, this is the other. I will get back to this. I liked Liberty's, like they always do the school, like they have that little video montage where you're selling the school. They show it. Yeah. Like Liberty University, building champions for Christ. The tagline, it sounds like it's over because they wait. There's a pregnant pause. Building champions for Christ. Pretty good. Like
the end of the car commercial where they have to say all the fine, where they read all the fine print at the end.
Yep. So if they had got it at that point, if they had scored 2 points, they would only be down 3 points instead of 4. Right.
Correct. Yeah. Which is a big difference in the game of football.
That's a big difference if you're near the end of the game. And you think now that's going to make a difference because you get a stop and you can kick a field goal to win the game, right? At that point in the game, though, right? So if you now, like, what I think it doesn't take into account is the risk reward of what happens if you miss it and then another team, and Liberty was going to keep scoring. Like everyone's putting points on the board. So what happened was Liberty then, and you start to go time by time, they missed it, all right? Now they're down 5, which means that if Liberty scores a field goal on their next possession, which was a very likely scenario, it actually did happen. Now they're down 8 instead of 7. So on their possession, which could have been the last of the game, depending on how these things are cycling back and forth, they would have to go for 8.
There were 20 minutes left in the game. They were not going to have a 20-minute possession.
But let's just say people aren't scoring. Like let's just say they're going back and forth, back and forth. Liberty ends up with a field goal. They're down 8 instead of down 7. Right. My point is there's so many different combinations that can happen, right? That can happen when you have that far out. There's no reason to play like you're playing in a 1 or 2 possession game where, yes, getting it to a 1 possession game instead of a 2 possession game or instead of a touchdown to get their game makes a big difference because then you can just drive down to the 40, kick a 50-something yard field goal. Although, let's be clear, the Chanticleers had a little trouble with the field goal game at the end of the game anyway, so it didn't seem to really matter. So that happened. It really bothered me. It bothered me because I thought we were all clear that generally speaking, we don't go for 2 until we get to the 4th quarter. We don't do it unless you have an incredible 2 game. And they don't make it. So it really bothered me. I went a little haywire. I kept tweeting about it.
You did, because you tweeted again at 10:47 p.m. I don't even care who wins. I simply can't stand illogical coaching decisions. Again, a tweet that received exactly the number of likes it should have. 0. Now,
didn't someone respond at some point? I feel like I got something somewhere.
I don't know. Not on those 2 tweets. So look, everything you said is right? But you're coming from, and this is your personal philosophy, you're coming from, what if this goes wrong? And you're thinking, all right, if we go for 2 and we don't get it, then this happens, then this happens, then this happens. There's an awful lot of people, some call them optimists, who make these decisions based on what if things go right. And statistically, if you look at this, and I didn't, because I don't know how to do this stuff, but you know who did? 538.
I know.
Silver and his people.
Now you're a stat. You can barely add. You can barely count to 12.
Now I can read. And statistically speaking, you should go for it, and you will be in a better situation more often than not. Now, you've enumerated how probability works. In a small sample size, anything can happen. But over the long haul, all you can do is get your chips in the middle with the best chance to win and then see what happens. And that's what Coastal Carolina did. And it actually worked out for them as poorly as humanly possible. They do not succeed in the 2-point try. Liberty then gets the ball and scores a touchdown on their next possession. So the worst possible outcome happened, and Coastal Carolina was still able to be in a tie game and force overtime.
Yeah, that's because they had to go for 2 to make it. So they had to kind of roll. And they wouldn't have been in that. But
they were successful.
But they could have been up 1 at that point if things had gone.
there was nothing wrong with kicking the field goal in that situation as a decision. I would never in a million years look at
the extra point.
Yeah, the extra point. Yes, excuse me. Yeah. I would never look at that and think, well, that's an awful decision. They just cost their team the game. However, it is also not an illogical coaching decision to go for it.
I just think the risk. So I understand Nate Silver, yes, and I'm sure over time that decision is the right decision. My point is the downside of not making it, the risk did not accommodate for the reward, given the amount of permutations and combinations that were very likely to happen. By the way, yes, I'm
welcome to every 55-45 decision in the world, right? Any decision that has no clear, oh yes, you should do this, you should not do this. There's going to be some sort of risk where if you choose one way, bad things might happen.
But I think the bad things well outweighed the possible good things, given the number of additional scores that Liberty was likely to make. Although Hugh Freeze tried to make sure that wasn't possible.
He sure did. And this is what you should have been tweeting about. What you should have been tweeting about was how awful Liberty performed inside the 5-yard line at the very end of the game. They had decided, right? They had decided that they weren't going to score the touchdown. They wanted to milk as much clock as possible. Fine decision. They would kick the short field goal. They try to win at the end of regulation. What they didn't do was kneel on the ball. So they try. There is one thing that I truly believe, and I've never coached a sport at any level in my life, so take that with a grain of salt.
Never? Wait. You have never volunteered to do like a Little League baseball clinic or something?
No. What? Why would I do that?
Just out of like you've never, like, let's be clear. I mean, you're in about a day or two, because you're going to have a chance to make some. To kind of decide how you're going to better yourself in 2021, how you're going to be a better you in 2021 than you were in 2020.
Okay.
And I'm going to argue.
I personally, I don't make New Year's resolutions.
Of course you don't. Just like you don't pick the NCAA tournament, because those are two fun things to do.
No, I just believe if you need to make a change in something in your life, you shouldn't wait for the next year to start to do it.
It's convenient. It's convenient. It's the perfect time. It also gives you liberty to kind of really run up against it at the end of the year. Like, if you're like, look, I'm going on a diet, it also is like, bring on the fat. Like, you can dig a hole. But why wouldn't you have more disposable time than just about anyone I know?
That is, first of all, that is 100% incorrect.
It's not.
It is 100% incorrect.
I know for a fact that someone proposed a very long road trip for you.
Well, and you were like, right now in the quarantine time where everything's shut down, that yes, right now, immediately,
like,
name the day. Yes, this year specifically, I have had more free time than ever before. And by the way, so have you, and so is just about everybody else on the planet.
I don't have free time.
Please.
Travel tournaments. I got all kinds of things going on. I got kids here, and you could, but you should be, sports. You're a sports broadcaster. You are a student of the game. You know baseball particularly well, if I'm not mistaken, right?
I do. Yeah.
You know basketball pretty well, and not for nothing, football. I don't think anyone would take you seriously as a football coach, but I think
take me seriously as any kind of coach. Not that you need to be not that you need to be taken seriously to coach 7-year-olds.
I'm just surprised you've never decided to give a little bit of yourself and say, like, hey, how can I help out? How can I help out? I'm
pretty busy during sports seasons.
You know what?
I'm pretty busy.
I bet you the women's basketball team that attach your wagon to so you can get a free ring every now and then and a couple trips to Hawaii. They do. They do. The one thing that's made, I know we aren't up to this yet, the one thing that's made me have a little bit of joy this past year is you haven't gotten all this free undeserved travel.
That's true. I haven't. In fact, I lost a lot of free undeserved travel to some really nice places. And that was one of the worst things about this year.
That's Schadenfreude.
Unbelievable. Right? Unbelievable that what you're concerned about is that I didn't get to go do fun things. What an awful,
you haven't perpetuated the scam on society that you have for the last.
Not a scam. I provide a very valuable service.
By the way, did you see? I was just mentioning rings. Did you see those Lakers championship rings?
No, but I bet they're nice.
They're, of course. You can wear it as a bracelet. They are
Sure.
enormous.
That's what you do with these things. You make them ostentatious. Anyway, the point I was trying to make before your head exploded that I haven't ever coached youth sports despite not having kids, or being like an athlete or someone who like, they would be like, oh, well, you're accomplished. You should coach this sport. For some reason, you couldn't handle that. I don't know why. The point I was trying to make is what Liberty did at the end of the game, their bowl game against Coastal Carolina, that you should never do. You should never, ever try to do something that you haven't practiced. And they clearly never practiced this idea of get the ball, stand there, wait for them to try to tackle you. Just kneel down if you're going to kneel down. I don't know what they were trying to do. Also, shout out to Coastal Carolina for figuring out what Liberty was trying to do and literally trying to carry that person into the end zone to force them to score.
It was like the reverse push, right?
Yeah.
Dragging him into the end zone.
I mean, the Coastal Carolina defenders like, you're coming with me, kid, and trying to take him into the end zone. And then the Liberty people are like, oh, no, don't you touch my running back, trying to pull them out of the end zone. And that's when the fumble happened. Just kneel in the ball.
That is one of the most I mean, I forget who was calling the game, but they had a hard time coming to terms with what they just saw. It was the most. Yeah. But both teams, I got to believe though, if you're Coastal Carolina, so that didn't bother me as much as I'll be honest, that didn't bother me because that to me is a normal dumb football play. I feel like that's the kind of dumb football play.
You think it's normal, the game of football, to have the ball on the 2-yard line, decide you don't want to score, but also don't want to kneel on the ball. So you're going to hand the ball off and just stand there? That strikes you as like, oh yeah, I've seen this before.
Hence why I'm not coaching football. Guys, does anyone have an idea for what we should do here? We got some time to kill. Anyone have an idea?
All right, Jimmy, we're going to hand you the ball and you're going to do nothing. They'll never see it coming.
You just stand. Make them react to you. So it was such a bizarre. And at some point, like you watch games, you're like, boy, I hate to see either team lose. This was one by the end. You're like, I really hate to see either of these teams win.
Well, kind of, yeah.
But I felt bad. I will say this, if we're going to put a bow on the 2020 college football season, watching that game, unfortunately, despite the long conversation we've had about wanting to see teams like Coastal Carolina in the playoffs, that Coastal Carolina team wanted no part of an Alabama squad. I mean, that would have been
But that's not the argument. The argument is not they should get in because they're going to win. They should get in, take their whooping by 50, and then we're done with it.
The argument is it's time for the Power Five to split away because they are playing a different brand of football. That's
also not wrong. It's also not wrong. If you want to see the best team in the country play the second best team in the country and not ever see upsets or, experience people rising above their level to accomplish something great, then yes, we can just set up.
Look, let's be honest. We probably have already seen, with the exception of the inevitable Alabama-Clemson final, we may have already seen the two best games when we saw the ACC championship and the SEC championship, because those were four of the best teams in the country played. The ACC. Actually, let's take the ACC game away because it ended up being horrible. But those were kind of your two best matchups, probably. So there you go. So so I was very salty about that. That the game, for whatever reason. Look, you get bored, like you're stuck in your house. You know where I was last year at this point. I was in Punta Cana. Living.
You're talking about unearned travel.
No, it was a family trip. So I was in Punta Cana, living off the buffets, right? Watching the kids eat star fruit and all that kind of stuff. And now I'm stuck here in the basement, wide awake watching. By the way, is it the most sportish thing in the world that the two hosts of this show? I mean, I think there was probably an NFL game on. There was some great NBA.
And we're watching Liberty Coastal Carolina.
You're like, guys, we got to tune in for this one.
And by the way, look, pandemics end. I think we're going to get back to some relative normality at some point in the hopefully, fingers crossed, near future. You know what I don't think is ever coming back? The buffet. I think we may have eaten off our last buffet.
And I've always had a love-hate relationship with the buffet. By the way, a certain person we were talking about earlier who will not be named.
You just cannot not bring up a joke that no one but us understands. Like, what is the weird compulsion in your mind that's like, I have to say this even though no one will understand it? Like, not even the person who we're talking about will understand that we're talking about them.
Because it could be one of many people. The thing is,
how does your mind work?
Because most things I do to make myself happy, and this makes me laugh. So when I do it, it makes me laugh. I understand it's probably bad television. It's probably bad television. If it's bad, it's even worse podcast. They can't even see me laughing.
Put that on our sizzle reel. It's probably bad television. If there's ever a line that could be our tagline, it's that.
So at any rate, the buffet, I have a love-hate because there's some buffets. We're going to go down a really ugly road here because we're about to offend a lot of people in a lot of places. I'm gonna just create a bucket here. Those giant restaurants,
yes,
where for a number that always ends in 99, you can get everything from a bacon wrap fillet to king crab's legs to a banana Foster to a bunch of other things that feel right off like a Disney World resort menu. All of those things, or Shoney's, right? And you can get them all and as much as you want. And they show the commercial, and the person has a plate that looks like a trough.
I mean, we all know how buffets work.
That if 2020 killed that, God bless. Like, I think I can live with that. That said, I mean, I find them, and by the way, I mean, it's just gross. Like, it's gross because everyone's just shoving their pie holes with as much custard as they can.
Because you
get in there.
You create a value proposition, right? When you say, all right, you're going to hand me $17.99, and in return, you can eat as much as you want. So now in your head, you're thinking, well, I have to beat the system. Like, I have to get my money's worth. Whereas when somebody brings you a meal for $17.99, you finish the meal and go, well, that was a great meal. Yeah. That's not how buffets work. Psychologically, everybody's like, well, I got to get a good deal out of this. Yeah. And so they go away. As you can tell, I'm not a big buffet person.
Well, so I don't, but I will say, like, in places like when you go to these resorts, right? Like when you go like to, to Punta Cana or whatever, it's kind of fun. Like, it's part of the experience, right? You're there's a buffet, you eat what you want. You don't want to kind of being served every meal. It takes away from the amount of time. You just want to have that kind of leisurely experience. And so there's something really lovely about that. Have you ever been to any of these all-inclusive resorts?
Oh, of course. Okay. Yes. Sure. And it's very similar on cruises and things like that. Like,
well, the cruise ship I have a problem with. The cruise ship is just like a bunch of cattle getting fattened up at sea.
The only difference, by the way, between a cruise ship and the resort on land when it comes to the buffet situation is that one is floating and one isn't.
Oh, it's a big difference. That proximity creates all of the difference. I'm telling you, once you create literally, we're talking about literally herd mentality. You put everyone together on and you got nowhere to go. You're locked to these cruise ships. I will never go on a cruise ship. And by the way, I don't care. And by the way, I've been validated. Anyone who watched this whole thing, not a surprise that the cruise ships were, by the way, and no offense to anyone who's enjoying their vacation right now, watching Sportish while out at sea. But
how many people do you think are watching us out at sea?
What's the over under?
0.5. No offense to the people watching us at sea.
You think zero? You think we have not a single viewer right now on a ship? Not one.
I can barely figure out how to watch us in my living room. And you think people are figuring out how to get this on television on a boat?
But your options are more limited. Your options are, by the way,
and which is why we don't make the cut.
No. Well, by the way, now we're speaking to the one viewer we know we have, which is the person that edits our commercials, who, by the way, is doing a great job, hitting the right spots, doing a great job.
We love you. That has been a marked improvement. I feel like we should give a year-end review to this person. That has been a marked improvement throughout the year, because it used to be just, commercial time. Now,
it wasn't even that. It was random robots.
Right. Now it's, it makes sense. Like, we're kind of breaking this thing up into segments. So cheers to you, person we've never met.
Great work. But now, speaking to the Sportish management and the commercial folks, why not do an exclusive deal with Carnival? Why not do something?
Yeah, I'm sure that's in the works. Now that we've been talking about how much we hate cruises. I'm sure we're exactly who they want to do a deal with.
How bad would we be if we it's the Sportish cruise? Just the two of us sitting sitting up on a riser at the buffet, be like, hey, You've eaten a lot already. I think I saw you here like an hour ago. This is your second
foisting our elitist opinions upon everybody trying to have fun. The limbo is stupid. Anybody who wants to do the limbo is dumb.
What, are you dancing to that Billy Ray Cyrus song? Are you kidding? Yeah, go back to the slot machines. Have fun. But
the probability says you're going to lose.
That's fine. Go do it anyway. Why? Can't do this one. Look, I just want you. No point going to the gym now.
The fitness center might not be officially closed, but it might as well be.
The Sportish cruise would never happen.
Never, ever. It'd be a very small boat. We could probably do it in a kayak.
Honestly, if we're going to do a cruise, I think it's on brand. I want to do one of those riverboat cruises.
Okay. Yeah, I'd actually, you know what? If I was going to go on a cruise, I'd want to go on a river cruise.
Yeah, I think so.
I feel like that'd be a better cruise experience.
We'd be doing like all those European river cities, right? I mean, the history would get a little old, but we'd do it. We'd also be, I mean, I'm not that young, but we'd still be the youngest people on the cruise by like 40 years. I can tell you, everyone on that cruise. Did everyone here already get the virus shot? How did you guys get in line first?
You're all in tier 1? In a way, it's the safest place for us to be.
It might be. We're with the herd.
All right,
if we go tour the cities, we just have to walk in the middle of the pack.
Look at the shield of grandmas. All right.
How did we get here? This is not how we should be ending the inaugural 2020 of Sportish.
I'm just envisioning you holding up a grandma, like throwing her in the face of all the people you encounter to get the virus because she's got the shot. To your right, Agnes. To your right.
I need to see the Spanish steps.
All right. Here's the last thing that we want to talk about this year. Just a bit of a retrospective about the best and the worst things that have gone on in the world of sports, and maybe, as you could tell, outside of the world of sports
a little bit.
During 2020. We started this program because sports ended, right? We were like, we want to start a sports show when no sports are happening. And so we started this, what was a podcast at the time, to basically chronicle like the sports world without games happening. So I think this would be an interesting exercise, like some of the best, some of the great things that happened this year, some of the worst things that happened this year. We can spend the last couple of minutes that we have with you in 2020 talking about those things. So Keith, I'll let you go first. Is there anything that particularly stood out to you this year that was either great or awful?
All right, we'll give you a couple of greats.
Okay.
On a relatively serious note, I think the access we got during the bubble was phenomenal.
100% agree. That was on my list too. 100% agree.
I think, and I know, look, I understand why a lot of journalists are a little disappointed because they are not getting the access, and it is truly a direct to consumer model now. And it's going to be hard to undo that one. So once that genie is out of the bottle, I don't know that athletes or that journalists are ever going to get the same access they used to get. But that said, I mean, getting to watch like the Instagram posts and all that, like that was the best part of the NBA season. So I think that was one of my number ones. Perhaps on a slightly less serious note, as you know, the Allendale 5K was unable to be contested this year because of COVID. Now,
and remember, we talked about, you go back, you watch old episodes, ftfnext.com, or get the app. We did a whole thing about Keith Strudler and the Allendale 5K. Go check that out, and then come back.
And I don't think I have a lot of years. I mean, COVID has not been kind to my body, and so I don't know that I don't know that the speed's ever going to be what it once was. Obviously, I'm getting much older, but this says 2019. It does seem like that will have to roll over. So it seems like I'm going to get an extra year out of my championship trophy. So one of the pros of this year was I get to be the champion for an additional year. I will still reign supreme over the Allendale running community for one additional year until, of course, this race is contested again, at which point it will probably be the end. So that's my second positive of this year. I go the NBA, the access to the NBA bubble. I'll take, and then I'll take me remaining the Allendale 5K champion as number 2. How about you?
So my number 1 was very much the same as yours. It was all of the behind the scenes content that we got. And it wasn't just in the NBA, but it was most predominantly in the NBA. I look at athletes starting their own media entities, whether it's like Matisse Thybulle's blog or JaVale McGee or Trevor Bauer in baseball, who did some like that behind the scenes access that they provided was some of the more interesting sports content that I can remember seeing at any point.
Yeah.
Like it was so it's truly access that you cannot get unless you are a person who is physically involved in the games. Like, I don't care what documentary you're making, you're probably not going to get to film in the film session before the game, or you're not going to get to film in the players' car as they're driving to the stadium. Like, that's just access that you do not get. So that was my number 1. Very similar to yours, was seeing, that behind the scenes look, and just players like recognizing that they can both perform their job and also do that, right? Like, one of the things I hate the most, and we've talked about this in the show too, again, ftfnext.com, you can go watch our old episodes. Like, when people are like, well, they can't do that, it's a distraction. Like, these people can walk and chew gum at the same time. Like, you can hold a camera and prepare to pitch in a baseball game. You don't need to spend 100% of your time like laser focused on what your job is. And so just, people getting off the backs of athletes and not being like, well, how could you, like, JaVale McGee both won an NBA championship as a guy who was in the rotation and edited vlogs in his spare time. Shocking that it didn't cut into his necessary film study.
Right. And the other thing is, we found that, if we're talking about some good things that came out of this, and I would agree, this is really about all sports production. I think we saw more creative camera angles. We saw more, everything that the bubble really was revolutionary in how it changed the way, and just some, MLS did a nice job in doing that as well. I would say there was certainly some, if you're going to kind of, another good thing that came out of this, there's a certain camaraderie that did get built. And I understand a lot of that is, some people will say that was synthetic and it came at an enormous price in some ways, at the price of, a lot of athletes getting sick, particularly when they were out of a bubble environment. And I do not want to discount that the argument about whether they should or shouldn't be playing is still a very real one in certain sports. And I think college basketball ain't going really well right now. I don't know how that's going to go. Duke has decided to join the Ivy League, or Duke women's basketball.
The Duke women anyway. Yeah. They've shut their season down. A very well-known ACC power.
We've also learned, and another good thing about that, for those of us who find ourselves in the Atlanta area, if you want lemon pepper wings, we now know the best. We didn't know that before.
We did not. You can get them in Magic City. Shout out to Lou Williams. Boy, but I mean, I tell you what, has anywhere but the strip club brought down more athletes than in 2020? I mean, you got now James Harden has gotten in trouble. Dwayne Haskins lost his job, and is primarily because he was at the adult ballet.
The Rockets wanted out. James Harden was looking. Well, I will also say, so part of the issue, and I think this, we're going to go to a negative pretty soon, but one of the downsides certainly of all this is, and this is true for everyone in the COVID era, people know where you are now all the time. I don't know much about the adultery market, and I say that with really don't.
Exactly what someone would say.
But I imagine for those that choose to be unfaithful or have a second relationship, I imagine that must be much more difficult at this particular moment in time, because everyone knows where everyone is all of the time. Like, I know where everyone in my family is all the time. You know why? Because it's like 7 feet from me. And by the way, we could live in a 40,000 square foot house and we'd all be sitting in the same room. And I don't know what that is. We never seem to leave the kitchen or whatever it is. So it is very difficult. I mean, we tend to know where people are a lot more now, because there's so few places you can go. Like, there's so few places no one just go. Like, no one's like, well, where's Andra right now? No one's like, oh, she's just out, just doing stuff. Like, no, you're like, well, she's going to go to this supermarket, then she's going to wash her hands, and then she's going to do this, and she's going to work, and she's going to work in her office, right? So that is another one of those things that I'm hoping. Look, when this thing opens up, and it's not going to be exactly as it was before, I hope we get a little bit of freedom back. Like I am craving just leaving and having someone be like, where are you going? And just the answer just being like out.
So one of your biggest downsides to 2020, it is now more difficult to cheat on your spouse. That is to you the worst. One of the worst things that came out of this year is that if you wanted to, it would have been much harder for you to cheat on your spouse. That is what jumps out at you as one of the year's biggest challenges.
It's funny. I didn't have that written down, but as we talk through it,
So mine is a little more serious than that. It's something that's rubbed me the wrong way this entire year.
I have others. That's not my number one.
We know you have others. I think that back in late March and into April, when everything was shut down, I think that most sports leagues missed an opportunity to do very good in the world and take a position of leadership in terms of advocating for public health, advocating for better testing, advocating for people to wear masks and things like that as the way to get sports back, as opposed to doing what they did, which was coming up with contingency plan after contingency plan to figure out, well, how can we play? We got to get these games happening to distract the public or whatever they decided to say was the reason they had to do it. It was to make their TV money. I think they missed an opportunity to be leaders in the country and say, hey, you want to see basketball again? Well, here's what we need to do. We need to make sure that everybody in the world can get tested whenever they want to get, or in the country can get tested whenever they want to get tested at their local pharmacy or doctor's office. Everybody needs to be putting on a mask. Like, if you want to see basketball again, we all have to do these things. And I think they missed an opportunity to do that.
They may have. The reality is, if that were, the stance that they took, we might see basketball again in 2027.
Yeah, I don't know though. I think we'd be a lot better off, and maybe even not talking about this here on December 28th, if in March and April and May there was a little bit more of that and kind of a rallying, as opposed to 50-50 whether there's even a problem.
It's possible. I wouldn't want to. Maybe if the NFL had done it, I don't know. The NBA had that kind of pull. There was such, if you think about the cultural divide, particularly as we led into the campaign season, which was just brutal. I mean, I think people forget. You think COVID was bad. This election cycle was brutal. By the way, still not over.
I mean, well, yeah. And you want to know what's on my list of great things? My non-sports greatest thing is that COVID saved us from 6 more months of the brutal election cycle dominating the news, because there was such a long period of time that would have been spent with, will the Bernie bros ever support Joe Biden? And all of those hot takes that we just simply were able to gloss over.
Who was making that hot take?
So it was kind of like Ed Orgeron, they're like moonlighting as a news anchor.
It's an interesting
one of my positives.
Yeah.
One of my positives was there was no presidential campaign for like 4 months, and we all got saved from that ridiculousness.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And on a positive note, look, I think players' advocacy for social justice was impressive, and I think that happened because of the confluence of COVID, the attention that they were able to kind of garner in some cases in a bubble environment, some cases where they were the only game in town. I think, and I actually think, and again, I tend to be kind of, corporate shill, as you know, but I think
except for all the corporations that we've disparaged on this program.
Yep. Primarily
Olive Garden, we're looking in your direction.
And in many cases, entire states and parts of the country, of course.
Florida, here's looking at you, kid.
So I think that there's been definite movement, though, between players and ownership and players and management and officials to a little bit more understanding of the importance of athletes being given the opportunity to use their power and their voice. And I think certainly the NBA, that's already been happening. But look in the NFL, you can say whatever you want about Roger Goodell, but he moved, right? And there's been movement. And look, they both have positions that are understandable if you understand the context of their positions, right? Of their jobs and what they're responsible for. The reality is, though, there was movement, right? And same thing. Look, Washington football team. Again, no one has to say that Dan Snyder's a good guy, but the name is no longer, right? And so things are happening. I tend to believe, because I'm old, like that progress doesn't happen overnight. Things expedite that progress. It's that the arc of justice is long, right? I mean,
it's turning.
the arc of progress.
Barack Obama would always describe it as it's like trying to turn a cruise ship, to continue an analogy from earlier in the show. Like, it takes a long time to get that thing
I'll
going
go
in the other direction.
I'll go to the buffet on the Obama cruise ship. I feel like that's going to be a very upscale
before
situation.
the year ends, before we conclude the final sport.
I got a couple other bad ones. My number one bad one. Cornell hockey should have won a national championship. They were number one in the country. Number one.
Sure.
Two, the Ivy Leagues are not playing sports potentially ever again. And now when I tell people I competed for Cornell, they're like, oh, those are they don't play sports anymore, do they? The only people that love us are the epidemiologists. So that's my number one bad for the year.
I know, I said I don't like to make New Year's resolutions, and that's true. But hey, it's an easy trope for the last 2 minutes of this show. What should we, as a Sportish family, what should we resolve to do better next year?
Okay. I think, all right. One, we should prep for the show.
Whoa.
Is that too much? Is that going to be like,
when do we take?
When are we taping our first show? Are we going to be like the people that couldn't make it to like July 3rd? So that would be my number one. We should be nicer to Michael Wallace.
Should we though? Has he earned that?
Fair enough. I think you should be more committed to the production values on your side of the house. You seem to have before we started to put a very hard line on certain improvements. So that's my third. And I that's for you. That's something for you to think about. I don't need you to give me an answer today. I just want you to
I'll give you an answer today. It's no. No is the answer today. What you see is what you're getting.
I think we should start doing more on social. Like we should actually start like, but here's my hope for this is my Sportish resolution. Look, you'd never heard of Sportish right before this, except for that other podcast. It was called Sports-ish. Not even the same.
True. Before we started this show, had to talk about whether it was copyright infringement. We're pretty sure it's not. If you're a lawyer, don't tell us otherwise.
Yeah. But I think my resolution is to try to get some guests every now and then. How about that? I'll do that. I'll get some good, funny guests. Patrick McEnroe, we're waiting for you. He's our number one get right now. He'll come back. I think by this time, in my prediction, we are going to be a household name. That's my prediction for Sportish. We will have gone from, we're already in your household. We're going to be, and you will have been there first.
Tell your friends and have them tell a friend. That's it for Sportish in 2020. But look, we're back the first week in 2020. No weeks off. We take no time off on this program. We know that you need us 52 weeks a year, and gosh darn it, we are going to deliver. So for Mike Wallace and Dr. Keith Strudler, thanks so much for hanging out with us. My name is Geoff Brault, and we'll see you next year.
Thanks for listening to Sportish. See you next time.